Um, Hello, my dear students. Do listen to me. Hello, 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 my dear students. Hello, my dear students. Good afternoon, everyone. Today is the one of the important day for us, as we do belong to Odisha state, so we have to celebrate the birth of Odisha as Odisha Divas. So my best wishes, you all, my dear students, so far as we are congregated each other in this famous day, and we are going to take our class. So I welcome you, all my dear students, to participate in my teaching and learning process. Please listen whatever I am discussing, or if you do have any doubts, please ask any question. So we have to start our discussion. So far as the today's topic is concerned, I have to discuss with you institutions of the European Union. Okay, I have to discuss with you the institutions of European Union. So first of all, try to understand, so far as the European Union is concerned, I have already started our discussion regarding this burning topic. And this is mostly vital for us because we do understand the importance of European Union. So far as the emergence of Ukraine-Russia war is concerned. Recently, this is a burning issue. So try to understand. We have to make our discussion interesting. If we will see the present condition of the world and the changing process of the world. So here you can find one thing, that the European Union, that is a supranational organization where member states have mutually agreed to surrender some part of their sovereignty to European institutions, which have been created by them by their own force, which will and when represents the collective interest of the European people. So the Council, so far as the people's collective choice is concerned, or the states' interest are, so far as the number of states, those who are the member of European Union, their interest is concerned. That means the European Commission and for European parliaments created by the founding treaties of Paris and Rome constitute the triangle of the European Union. These institutions, that means assisted by the hosts of other European institutions, take decision on behalf of all individual members states. This provides hegemony to the European views. The institutions have enabled Europe to speak with one voice on European and global issues. The long cherished dream of European thinkers and the statements such as Victor Hugo and Jean Monnet of one Europe has been eventually realized. So try to understand one thing is very important here. That means the European Council is the apex body of the European Union. Who is the apex body? European Union, European Council. My dear students, please write down this. This is a very important points. That's which is the prime body of the European Union. So your answer should be the European Council. European Council is the apex body of European Union. All the important policy decisions and proposals for legislation are initiated here. The Council represents the will of the member states of the European Union. The European Union or the European Commission is the executive body of the European Union. Its a main responsibility is to execute the decision by the Council and laws passed by the European Parliament. So it is the bureaucratic arm of all the European Union. The European Parliament represents the will of the people of the Europe since 1979. That the European Parliament is directly elected by the people of Europe. The European Council, European Court of Justice is the supreme judicial institution of the European Union. It decides, that means the case, so far as it is concerned with the European Union. It's the founding treaties, so far as laws enacted by the European Parliament and protects the human rights in the member states. The European Union owes its success to its institutions. These institutions do not seek to be the substitute of the national institutions, but rather they aim at strengthening national institutions. They act only when it is felt that efforts at European level will be more rewarding than the efforts at national level. So thus, national institutions of the member states and institutions of European Union are not rival, but complementary to each other. So in this unit, so far as the European institutions is concerned, we have to discuss, my dear students, please remember this. We have to discuss the constitution, function, and roles of the various institutions of the European Union. Kausalya, you are welcome.
Yes,
Why
sir.
you
Yes,
are
sir.
late in the class? Yes, why you are late in the class? Please tell your friends to join in right time. So this is the class which is organized by Indira Gandhi National Open University. You must have known. This is one of the important institution and central body of our state. So you have to obey the guideline of the institution, the statute of the institution, the rules and regulations of the institutions by which your career may develop. So this is a very good class. Myself,
Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Vivekananda Singh, Assistant Professor in Political Science. So I am here to clear your doubts. So whenever any question arises, please put up their question. I may try to solve your problems. So please listen
Okay,
what I
sir.
am discussing. Okay. So please
Okay,
tell
sir.
your friends to be regular in your class. So
Okay, sir.
you might have known one thing. So far as the topic is concerned, we have to concern with the objective. What is the main aim and objective to study this chapter? What is this chapter? What is the title of this chapter? European institutions. The institutions of European Union. First of all, we have to gather our knowledge. That is regarding various institutions of the governance of European Union. Kausalya, you might have known recently what happens in the world so far as the Ukraine and Russia war is concerned. If
Yes,
you
sir.
are interested, that means in this respect, you can understand European Union. As Ukraine joined in the European Union, your Russia, so far as Vladimir Putin is concerned, created a problem. They don't want, he does not want, doesn't desire. That means Ukraine should with the European Union. For that point of view, the war is continuing. European Union is a powerful body. So you have to understand the various institutions for the governance of European Union, how European Union runs. This is a very interesting topic for us. So this is an opportunity for you, my dear students, particularly Kausalya. Don't, that means don't neglect yourself so far as the teaching and learning process is concerned. Then we have to discuss regarding the, if you do feel any problem, please raise question. Okay. So then come to our discussion, the constitution, functions and role of European Council, Council of Ministers, the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the European Court of Justice. We have to discuss this. Then we have to discuss regarding the role of other institutions and actors are participating in the affairs of the European Union. So far as the topic is concerned, we have to understand which is the apex body of European Union. That means the European Council is the apex body of the European Union. Okay, top body, highest body. My dear students, please remember, that means European Council is the highest body. So, for the policy making, so far as policy making body is concerned, that is European Council. So, the European institutions, that means the institutional architecture. So far as the law and regulation is concerned, the European Council was established in 1974. Try to understand, please remember this and please write down, my dear students, particularly Kausalya, please write down this. That when and how the European Council was established. So far as the question is concerned, please write down that the European Council was established in the year 1974, primarily because it was increasingly felt that it was failing to respond adequately or quickly, enough to new and increasingly difficult challenges. The heads of the states or governments began holding regular summit meeting in March 1975. It became an informal part of the community system institutions till it was legally recognized by the Single European Act 1987. The Nice Treaty. Then the Nice Treaty, please remember, that is 2000, accorded de jure status to the European Council, whereby Council nominates the person for the position of the President of the European Commission. So the Council consists of the head of the state plus governments of all member states of the European Union and the President of the European Commission. They are assisted by their foreign ministers and one other member of the European Commission. The President of the European Council, that means so far as briefs the European Parliament on the conclusions of each European Council meeting. Since the mid-1990s, the European Council has met for at least 4 summits each year, twice during each 6-monthly rotating presidency. So externally, meetings can be convened in extraordinary circumstances. So until 2001, the twice yearly summits at the end of the presidency were held in the country of the presidency. However, from 2002, the end of the presidency summits are held in Brussels. Other summits can be organized by the presidents wherever they prefer. Then try to understand one thing, The Council of Ministers is the European Union's main decision-making body. It was created by the founding treaties of Paris and Rome during 1950s. It represents the member states, and its meetings are attended by one minister from each of the European Union member states. Each and every member of European Union member states, that means they have to send their, that means minister, so far as minimum one minister to attend the discussion, deliberation, and the council meeting, so far as it needs. So which ministers attend, which meeting, depends on what subjects are on the agenda. The composition of council ministers depends upon the matters to be discussed by it. Then try to understand that the council has 6 key responsibilities. The European Council has, that means 6 key responsibilities, and these are: first is, most European Union legislation is adopted joined by the Council and European Parliament. As rule, the Council only acts on a proposal from the Commission. The Commission normally has a responsibility for ensuring that European Union legislation, once adopted, is correctly implemented. Then economic and monetary policy coordination. The economic and financial affairs, that is economic, that means so far as the economic and monetary policy coordination is concerned, the Council coordinates the economic and monetary policies of the member states. The third one is conclusion of international treaties and agreements. Each year the Council signs a number of treaties and agreements between the European Union and, you can understand one thing, and non-European countries, as well as the international organizations. So these agreements cover broad areas such as trade, cooperation, and developments, or deal with specific subjects such as textiles, fisheries, transports, etc. Then try to understand so far as the fourth is concerned, that is budget approval. The European Union annual budget is decided by jointly the Council and the European Parliament. So if the two institutions do not agree, the rules allow the Council to take the final decisions on compulsory expenditure, mainly agricultural expenditure and expenses arising from international agreements with non-European countries, while Parliament has the last word on non-compulsory expenditure and the final approval of the budget as a whole. Then we have to understand regarding the common foreign and security policy. The European Union is working to develop a common foreign and security policy, but foreign policy, security, and defense are matters over which member states retain the sovereignty. They have not pulled their sovereignty in these areas. So European Parliament and Commission play only a limited role in this field, and cooperation in criminal matters. The Council coordinates cooperation between the national courts and policy matters in criminal matters. So try to understand, this is the very important thing. We have to remember that the presidency of Council rotates every 6 months among the countries of the European Union. Each European Union country Please remember, is don't take charges of the council and chairs all the meeting for a period of 6 months. So try to understand that each and every member states of the European Union assume the chair of the presidents in every 6 months. This is a rotation. So this rotation is a good process by which there may not be a corruption. The council and its preparatory bodies are supported by over 3,000 European Union career civil servants. Okay. Then try to understand one thing. So far as their member states concerned, German, France, Italy, the United Kingdom, Spain, Poland, Romania, Netherlands, Belgium, and your Czech Republic, Greece, Hungary, Portugal, Austria, your Bulgaria, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Ireland, and Lithuania, Slovakia, Cyprus, Estonia, and Latvia, Luxembourg, Slovenia, Malta. Try to understand? And the votes are also distributed among these countries, and the total is 345. Okay, that means Germany, France, Italy, the United Kingdom, they have 29, Spain, Poland 27, Romania 14. So this is the power of votes. Okay, like this, the decisions in the council are taken by votes. The bigger the country population, the more votes. So the power of votes related with the size of the population. Okay, and it has so far as but the number of weightage is favor of the less population countries. From 1st January 2007, a qualified majority voting in the council reached with the following two considerations are fulfilled. A majority of the member states give their approval in certain cases. That means a true third majority is required. That means a minimum 255 votes in favor of the proposition, which 70.73.9% of the total. So every member states can also ask to verify that votes, the favorable votes represents at least 62% of the total population in the union. If these criteria are not respected, the decision will not be adopted. The distribution of votes since 1st January 2007 is as follows, as I have already discussed with you. So try to understand one thing. That means whenever we are talking about this, the most important thing is here that European Union is the apex body that we have to take the decision that needs the approval of the council. Then come to the European Commission. So far as the European Commission is concerned, the European Commission is much more than the Secretariat of an international organization. So it is the executive body of the European Union. It is responsible for executing the decisions of the Council and Parliament. Its job is to represent and uphold the interest of the European Union as a whole. Like the Council and Parliament, it has been created by the European Unions, that is founding treaties of 1950s. The Commission is independent of national governments. So until 1st May 2004, the European Commission had 20 members, 2 each from France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the United Kingdom, and one is from each of the other member states. After 1st May 2004, with the admission of 10 new countries, the European Commission consists of one commissioner from each of member states of the European Union. So the member states first agree on who should be designated as the president of the commission. The designated president is then approved by the European Parliament. The president designates in consultation with the government of the member states, chooses the other members of the commission called commissioners. The new parliaments then interview all members of the commission individually and gives its opinion on the entire college. After the approval of the parliaments, the new commission can officially start work. So far, that means from the January. Then try to understand one thing is very important here, that the European Commission attends all the sessions of parliament where it must clearly and justify its policies and programs. So it also answers all the written and oral questions asked by the members of the European Parliament. The Commission staff is recognized in departments known as Directorates General, the DG, and services. Each DG is responsible for a particular policy area and is headed by a Director General who is answerable to one of the commissioners. Overall conditions coordination is provided by the Secretary General, headed by the Secretary General, who is answerable directly to the President of the Commission. So it is the Director General that actually drafts legislative proposals, but these proposals become official only when adopted by the Commission. That is, weekly meeting. Once the proposal is ready, is put on the agenda of the next Commission meeting. Then come to discussion so far as the functions of the Commission is concerned. That means the European Commission has four main roles. First is propose legislation to the European Parliament and the Council. And the second is it manages and execute European Union policies and the budget. And the third one is it enforces European law jointly with the Court of Justice. That means the Commission acts as the guardian of the treaties. Then we have to understand so far of the it represents the European Union in the global forums together. That means the Commission represents the European Union on the international stage. It enables the member states that to speak with one voice on global forums such as the World Trade Organization. The Commission also has the responsibility of negotiating negotiating international agreements. Then what is this? That is got treaties on behalf of the European Union. Whenever the question comes how the European Union works, that means you can understand one thing, that European Union works through the represents the European Union with the global forum, the European Parliament. Then we have to discuss regarding another institution of European Union, that is European Parliament. The European Parliament was established as an assembly for the European wholes and still community in 1952. In 1962, the title, that is European Parliament, was adopted but formalized in 1986. Till 1979, members of the European Parliament were nominated by the parliaments of one member states, but since 1979, they are elected by the direct and universal suffrage by the organization. And the most important is the European Parliament has its seat in the Strasbourg, France, where it holds its plenary session. Although committee meetings, and some part sessions are held in Brussels. The secretariat standing committees are the heart of the parliament. Then we have to understand that the parliament, okay, for example, we have to understand that the seats of parliaments have been allocated on the basis of population of the member states. The present parliament has 732 members. The number of the members so far as the members of European Parliament, that is from each country, is as follows. Belgium, now 22, which was 24 in 2004 to 7, and 2007 to 24. Now it has reduced with the size of population, now 22. Bulgaria, that is 17. Then Cyprus, 6. Then try to understand so far as the Cyprus is concerned, 6. And like this, you have to understand that then understand one thing is here. The parliament is composed of political groups, not representatives of member states. They do not sit in national delegations, but in traditional political groups. There are 7 political groups in the European Parliament. These groups are: first is European People's Party, that is Christian Democrats and European Democrats, EPP and ED, Socialist Group, PS, Alliance of Liberal and Democrats of Europe, DLD. Then there is Greens, European Force. Then try to understand that we have to think about the functions of the parliament. So far as the functions of the European Parliament is concerned, that is, the most important function is legislation. What is the most important thing? Legislation. The European Parliament shares with the Council the power to legislate, that is to adopt European laws, directives, regulations, decisions, legislative proposals, from the Commission requires. And even if you can understand one thing, the most common procedure for passing European Union legislation is a co-decision. The procedure places the European Parliament and the Council or an equal footing, and it applies to legislation in a wide range of fields. Then European Parliament also provides what provides impetus for new legislation for examining the Council, the Commission's annual works program, considering what new laws would be appropriate and asking the Commission to put forward proposals. Then to come to a discussion, that means under the cooperation procedure, the European Parliament gives its opinion on drafts, directives, and regulations proposed by European Commission, which can amend its proposal to take account of Parliament's opinion. Under the assent procedure also introduced in 1986, the Parliament must give its assent to international agreements negotiated by the Commission, to any proposed enlargement of the European Union, and to a number of other matters, including any changes in election rules. Okay. Then come to the democratic supervision over the European Union institutions. The European Union exercises democratic supervision over the institutions of the European Union in general, and the European Commission, okay, in particular. It does not show in several ways. That means we have to again understand that control over the European Union budgets. The European Union's annual budget is passed jointly by parliaments and the Council. The Parliament debates in two successive readings, and the budget does not come into force until it has been signed by the President of the European Parliament. The Parliament's Committee on Budgetary Control monitors how the budget is spent, and each other the Parliament decides whether to approve the Commission's handling of budgets for the previous financial year. The approval process is technically known as granting a discharge. How the European Union works, then we have to understand. That means the European Parliament has three places of work. First is Brussels, that is in Belgium, then Luxembourg, that's Strasbourg, that is in France, and your Luxembourg is home to the administrative office or general secretariat, meeting of the whole parliament, known as plenary sessions, take place in Strasbourg and sometimes in Brussels. Brussels committee meeting of the parliament are held in Brussels. Shifting of the parliament venue from Brussels to Strasbourg causes a lot of inconvenience to the member of parliament and huge financial burden to the European Union. The European Courts of Justice, based on Luxembourg, the European Court of Justice, ECJ, or simply the court was set up by the European Coal and Steel Community Treaty in 1952. The court is composed of one judge per member states, that is a total of 25 judges. For the sake of efficiency, the court rarely sits as the full court. It usually sits as a grand chamber of just 13 judges or in chamber of 5 or 3 judges. It is assisted by the 8 advocates generals whose role is to present regent's legal opinion on various cases before the courts. They must do so publicly and impartially. The judges and advocates generals are people whose impartiality is beyond doubt. They have the qualifications or compet- competence needed for appointment to the highest judicial positions in their home countries. They are appointed to the European, that means so far as European Court of Justice is concerned, by joint agreement among the governments of European Union member states. Then come to the discussion. So far as whenever we take a case study for our better observation and proper analysis, we can find one thing, that a court for instance, so far as its first instance is concerned, we set up in 1989 to help the European Court of Justice to cope with large number of cases. But before it, the court which attached to the European Court of Justice is responsible for giving ruling on cases brought by the European Union, citizens, companies, and organizations, and cases related to competition laws. The European Court of Justice and the Court of, that means you can understand, gives ruling on the cases brought before it. References for a parliamentary ruling, action for failure to fulfill an obligation, action for, that means so far as annulments, and actions for failure acts are the 4 most common types of cases brought before it. Then we have to understand another thing is here, the national courts in each European Union member states are responsible for ensuring that European Union law is properly applied in the country. However, there is a possibility that courts in different countries might interpret, that is European Union law, in different ways. To prevent this happening, there is a preliminary ruling procedure whereby in a case a national court is in any doubt about the interpretation or validity of an European Union law, it may ask the Council of Justice, it may ask the Court of Justice for advice. This advice is given in the form of a parliamentary ruling. That means, so far as the preliminary ruling is concerned. Then we have to understand, that means the other institutions which are the actors of the European Union, that is the European Court of Auditors, which scrutinizes the various expenses of the European Union and its institutions and submits its reports, okay, to the European Parliament. The objective of the audit to prevent misappropriation of the funds sanctioned by the European Parliament and ensures efficiency. And another thing is here, so far as that means whenever we are talking about European Economic and Social Committee, that means here we have to understand one thing, that represents civil society, employers and employees. The Committee of the Regions that represents regional and local authorities, the European Investment backed finances European Union investment projects and helped small business. That means the European, that is via the European Investment Fund. And the last but not the least, we have to remember these are the special agencies and the European Maritime Safety Agency, which have been set up by the European Union to handle certain technical, scientific, or management tasks. These agencies are not an European Union institution, but a body set up by a specific piece of European Union legislation to carry out a specific task. These agencies includes, that means Eurojust, the European Defence Agency, European Maritime Safety Agency, etc. Then we have to understand one thing, that the success of the European Union depends upon the success of the institutions. If the institutions of the European Union runs properly, automatically we can think about the success of the European Union. Because if this criterion is adopted, we can say the institutions of the European Union have succeeded in attaining the goals for which they were created. They have also smoothened and expedited the process of European integration and have provided mechanism to promote the welfare and prosperity of the European citizen. The European Union's decision-making process in general and the co-decision in particular involved three main institutions. These are European Parliament, which represents the citizens of the European Union and is directed and directly elected by them. The Council of the European Union, which represents the individual members, states, and the European Commission, which seeks to uphold the interest of the Union as a whole. Then understand one thing, that means the European Union treaties are agreed by the head of the state or governments of all the European Union countries and ratified by their parliaments, so far as the members of the states and the interest of the people are concerned. My dear students, please note down and please remember that I am instructing you all that some questions which may be the possible questions for our coming examination. The question may like this. First of all, please write down, my dear students, or please note down this, that the first question is, discuss the emergence and evolution of European Union. European Union institutions and their role in the European nation states and their role in the member of the European nation states. Or the second question is, please write down that examine, or you may write critically examine the composition and role of the European Council and Council of Ministers in the European Union. This is exact question I have collected. Then another important question, please remember, I suggest you these three questions only for your better preparation, that discuss the composition and role of the European Court of Justice discuss the composition and role of the European Court of Justice. That means particularly, please write down, particularly in the matter of protecting, okay, the interest of the European Union, okay, and the interest of the European Union, that means member states. Then come to the further discussion. So far as our topic is concerned, okay, we have to discuss further things. Okay, that means so far as the European vision in world affairs is concerned, we have to discuss regarding the decision making in the European Union. What is the decision making? We have to understand that is the decision making process. We have to understand so far as the European Union is concerned. First of all, my dear students, please remember that the decision making rules of the European Union are designed to foster collective responsibility for the policies of the Union. In fact, no major decision can be taken without the joint consent of three key institutions. That is the European Commission, the European Parliament, and the Council. The Council, that means the European Council. That means this has a tremendous role so far as the European Union main policy is concerned, because European Council that mobilize that means policy mobilizing body, and it has a vital role as played by the Commission. So with co-decision having become the norm in most policy areas, the European Parliament has been transformed into a politically and legal co-legislature along with the Council in most areas of competence of the European Union. So far as the discussion is concerned, we have to understand the procedure prescribed for decision making by the European Union and its institutions. Secondly, we have to understand, my dear students, please remember this. This is a very important point. That is the voting method. That is the voting methods adopted in European Union institutions. And the most important thing is here, which may not be last but the least, that overall working of the European Union system. Please remember these 3 points you have to understand. So far as the topic is concerned, we have to understand one thing is here, that the 3 main decision making institutions are the European Parliament, the Council of the European Union, and the European Commission. So these 3 institutions formulate the policies and laws, directive regulations, and decisions that apply throughout the European Union. So various treaties of the European Union, especially the Rome Treaty 1957 and the Maastricht Treaty, or when you understand the treaty on the European Union, have prescribed decision-making procedures, and we have to understand the circumstances in which they are to be applied. So the Court of Justice upholds the rules of European Union laws, and the Court of Auditors, which checks the financing of the union activities. Here we can find that there are the 5 other bodies to complete the system. The first body is the Economic and Social Committee that represents civil society and the industry. And the second is Committee for Regions, which represents regional and local authorities. And the third is the European Central Bank, which is responsible for formation of European monetary policy. And the fourth is European Investment Bank that finances European Union investment projects. And the last but not the least, that means European Ombudsman, that we can understand which guards European Union so far as the Ombudsman is concerned. Citizens and organizations against administrative lapses and shortcomings. So here you can understand one thing, that the assent procedure which you can find in the Article 192 of the Treaty of Establishing the European Community and introduced by the European Single Act, which is in the year 1986, Single Act 1986, 1986 and 1986. You can find that here that it requires the Council to obtain the European Parliament's assent before certain important decisions are taken. The assent principle is based on a single reading. Parliament may accept or reject a proposal but cannot amend it. If Parliament does not give its assent, the acts in question cannot be adopted. This is very important. Please remember, I am again repeating this. The assent principle is based on a single reading, that Parliament may accept or reject a proposal but cannot amend. Parliament can reject, Parliament can accept, but cannot amend. It cannot make any correction. If Parliament does not give its assent, the act in question cannot be adopted. Okay. And Parliament assent is mostly important. So far as the implementation of the policy or rules and regulations is concerned. So the assent procedures applies mainly to the accession of the new member states, which can find in the Article 49 of the Treaty on European Union, that association agreements and other fundamental agreements with third countries. It is also required with regard to citizenship, the specific tasks of the European Central Bank, amendments to the states of the European system. Then you can understand, so far as the European Parliament gives its assent for the application of sanctions imposed on a member state for serious and persistent breach of fundamental rights, which can find in Article 7 of the European Union Treaty, and for closer cooperation in the field subject to co-decision procedure. So, Parliament assent is given by a majority of votes cast. However, a majority of members is also required in 2 cases, namely the accession of new member states and the electoral procedure. Then we have to understand that the cooperation procedure. What is the cooperation procedure which can find in the Article 250 of the European Council Treaty, which was introduced by a single European Act, 1987. it gives the European Parliament, what? The greater influence in the legislative process by allowing in two readings. Initially, the scope of this procedure, which was considerably extended by the Treaty of the Maastricht. Then try to understand, however, the Treaty of Amsterdam subsequently reversed the trends by encouraging the co-decision procedure that can find Article 251 of the EC European Council Treaty. Since then, the cooperation procedure applies exclusively to the field of European Economic and Monetary Union. The cooperation procedure is always initiated by a proposal from the Commission forwarded to the Council and the European Parliament. In context of the first reading, Parliament issues an opinion on the Commission proposal. The Council, acting by a qualified majority, then draws upon a common position which is forwarded to Parliament together with all the necessary information and the region which led the Council to adopt this common position. Then we have to discuss regarding the co-decision procedure. So far of the co-decision procedure, which is the most frequently used procedure for most areas in which the European Union has a competence. The Treaty of Amsterdam has simplified the co-decision procedure, making it quicker and more effective and strengthening the role of parliaments. It also extended it to new areas such as social exclusion, public health, and fight against fraud affecting the European community financial interests. The Treaty of Nice further extended the scope of the co-decision procedure in parallel with and as a supplement to the extension of qualified majority voting by the Council, voting in the Council. As defined in Article 251 of the European Council Treaty, the co-decision procedure is the legislative procedure which is central to the community decisions making system. It is based on the principle of parity and means that neither the European Parliament nor the Council may adopt legislation without the other's assent. Then try to understand the fact is, that means whenever we are talking about the increasing the domestic nature of Council action, which requires Parliament to participate in exercising legislative power, we can understand that the legislative instruments which has been adopted by the qualified majority is like to fall within the scope of the co-decision procedure. In most cases, we can understand that co-decision in Parliament goes hand in hand with qualified majority voting in the Council. So for some provisions, we can understand the treaty, however, co-decisions and unanimity still coexists. So the co-decision procedure has strengthened Parliament's a legislative power in the following field: the free movements of workers' rights, that is of establishment of services the internet market, education, that is incentive measures, and health. So, and you can understand the consumer policy, trans-European network, the guidelines, then environment, general action program, culture, incentive measures, and research framework program. Then we can understand one thing is here, so far as the qualified majority voting, that means in the council of the ministers, the most common voting procedure in a council of ministers is qualified majority voting, that is QMV. My dear students, please write down this abbreviation. This is very important. This may find in your question so far as the coming examination is concerned. That is a qualified majority voting, QMB. What is a qualified majority voting? And you can find which is qualified majority voting. That is the voting procedure in the Council of Ministries. So this means that for a proposal to be adopted, that means it needs the support of a specific minimum number of votes. However, in some particularly sensitive areas, such as taxation, asylum, and immigration policy, council decisions have to be unanimous. So in this context, try to understand one thing is here, that we can find the various institutional reforms have taken effect, and a qualified majority voting has replaced in unanimous voting, which is less effective for developing an operational community policy. That is a veto risk. You can find one thing, so far of the qualifying voting system is concerned. This is a very important thing whenever we are talking about this. Okay, that qualified major voting. Then the topic of double majority comes. What is this? That means maintaining the present system of weighting of votes in the council after enlargements. That means to produce a qualified majority representing only a minority of the population of the European Union. And for that reason, the member states with the highest population wanted to see a re-weighting or double majority system, which will ensure that a majority in the council represented a majority not only of member states but also of the population, of the union. Then the Treaty of Nice, that is 2001, which set out to reform the operation of the community institutions in the round up to the enlargement, redefined the qualified majority in terms of the double or even triple majority, while the re-weighting of vote was in favor of the large member states. The qualified majority must also be a majority of the member states. This is combined with a system known as the demographic safety net, which means that each member state can request verification of whether the qualified majority represents at least 62% of the population of the union. If this condition is not fulfilled, the decision cannot be adopted, and these new rules, that means entered into force so far as the 1st November 2004 is concerned. Then the last thing is the unanimity. The unanimity is also, this is also a requirement for all the member states meeting within the council to be in agreement before a proposal which can be adopted. Since the single European Act, it has applied to fewer and fewer areas. In the context of the first pillar, voting by qualified majority is now the rule. The second and third pillars, however, still operates largely according to the intergovernmental method and the unanimity requirements. Although the Treaty of Nice introduced qualified majority voting in certain areas. Under the co-decision procedure, the treaty takes provision for unanimity in three cases, that is social security for migrant workers, recognition of diplomats, if the amendment of national legislation required, and incentive measures in the field of culture. So, what do we understand? So far as this topic is concerned, that means we have to understand one thing: the cooperation procedure and the co-decision procedure, that is, as pressures increase to overcome the democratic deficits in the decision-making mechanisms of the European Union, and partly to make decisions more flexible in view of an expanded and more heterogeneous regional economic grouping, the various treaties gradually extended the powers of the European Parliament. The only directly elected institutions in the Union institutional architecture as a result of co-decision procedures, which has applied to the majority of areas in which European Union has competence. Now, my dear students, please write down some important questions. So far as this chapter is concerned, please write down that critically examine the assent procedure, critically examine the assent, ASSENT, assent procedure, PROCEDURE. Please write down this. Critically examine the assent procedure and the cooperation procedure of the European Union. Then another question you should write, that write a short note on co-decision procedure. Write a short note on the co-decision procedure and write a short note on consultation procedure, and write a short note on consultation and write a short note on consultation procedure. Okay, please write down this. So far as the consultation procedure is concerned, this is very important. Okay, so then we have to discuss regarding the single European Acts and single markets. So far as this chapter is concerned, please understand one thing, that the Treaty of Rome 1957, which envisaged the eventual establishment of a common market, when it is stipulated that communities shall have its task by establishing a common market and progressively approximating the economic policies of the member state. So to promote throughout the community a harmonious development of economic activities, a continuous and balanced decision, and increase in stability and accelerated ranging of the standard of living and closer relations between the states belonging to it. Thus, the Treaty of Rome clearly envisages that the community, prosperity, and in turn its political and economic unity would depend on a single integrated market. So we have to understand the factors which are lead to the formation of the ideas of single European markets. Then we have to discuss the various reports and recommendations for the establishment of a single European market. And third, we have to understand the basic features of the Single European Act 1987. Then the main features and effects of the single markets and the obstacles coming into the way of working of the single markets. So in this context, try to understand one thing, that the economic recession in East and Western Europe in 1970s and in the aftermath of 1973 oil crisis tended to reinforce the preoccupation of member states with the protection of their national markets, not only against non-member states, but also against one another. The consequent occupation with nationalism and protectionism by governments and lobbyists from major industries against both internal and external competition had created a great resistance to unification. Thus, only marginal progress could be made in removal of barriers to the creation of single markets. So try to understand another thing is here. So far in the early 1980s, however, the member states of the European community began to show greater willingness to make a renewed, considered attempt to create a meaningful single markets. This realization was the result of so far of the loss of global competitiveness is concerned, increase of competition from the newly industrialized countries is concerned, then the stagnation of economic and political integration is concerned, then the structure of European industry, that is, which reflected the fragmented nature of the market and national attitudes apart from market division is concerned. Then we have to understand the kind of the most important thing is, that means Eurosclerosis. That is the most important thing is Eurosclerosis, or a decade poor and declining economic performance since the early 1970s and the growth of employment, both of which led to intense political pressure for the imposition of protectionist measures both at the national and the community level. So try to understand one thing is here, the lack of effective application and commercialization of European research and development was fragmented along national line. Moreover, companies in the European community that you can understand lack its resources and its innovative ability is required to bridge the gap between the marketplace and the laboratory, which were further weakened by their dependence on small national markets and by wasteful duplication of research. So you can find one thing is here, whenever we are talking about the commission white paper, that is June 1985, that is the realization amongst businessmen, economists, national politicians, and the member of the European parliaments increased, and they felt that the revival of the Europe was dependent on the creation of continental market. The heads of state governments of all the member states repeatedly made declarations committing themselves to the completion of a fully unified internal market. In 1985, they asked the European Commission to put forward concrete proposals to achieve that objective by 1992. The main architects of the drive towards the establishment of single market was Jacques Delors, the president of the European Commission. So try to understand one thing, that the Chekrin reports, which finds in the mid 1980s that there were clear signs that economic integration was at standstill and many non-tariff barriers existed within the economic European community. It was argued that the large single American market enables that American companies to introduce innovative products several years before this was commercially possible in the European community. So the total potential economic gain to the community as a whole from the completion of the internal market was established to be in the region, that is European Community Union, 200 billion, that means European Community Union or European Currency Unity, or more expressed in 1998. This was expected to add about 5% to the community gross domestic product. It predicted that in the medium term, market integration in the community would deflate consumer prices by an average of 6%, as well as boost output, employment, and living standards. So it also predicted that it would produce economics in public sector cuts equivalent, that means 2.2% of GDP, and boost that means the European Council a trade with the other countries by around 1% of the GDP. Then another thing, please remember here, then the Single European Act 1987. That means the Milan European Council meeting, June 1985, acknowledged that the legislative measures being adopted to give effect to the establishment of a single market were not likely to succeed unless the decision-making rules of the community were revised. This fact, along with the realization that other treaty-related matters also needed revision, lead to the establishment of an intergovernmental conference, that is IGC, to negotiate and prepare treaty reforms. The IGC began its work in the second half of the 1985 and completed its deliberations towards the end of 1985 at the Luxembourg Summit, December 1985, of the heads of the states governments. Member states agreed to the Single European Act, which was formally signed in February 1986. However, it did not come into force until 1st January 1987 because of ratification difficulties in Ireland. The Single European Act, that means, was the first major revision or amendments of the Treaty of Rome since its inception in 1957. It is widely regarded as the turning point for the integration process in Western Europe. The main provisions of the Single European Act were as follows. That means the C replaced the treaty requirement of the decision be taken by unanimity, which had made decision making a complex and lengthy process and slowed process to the pace of most reluctant states. Then the C introduced, that means try to understand one thing is here, that is the very important Single European Act. That this Single European Act introduced a new legislative procedure called the cooperation procedure, which enables the European Parliament to provide a greater input to the community legislative process in relation to those areas where the procedure applies. The cooperation procedure requires, that means, a closer liaison between both the European Commission and the Council with the European Parliament through the first and second reading of proposals as they pass from the stages of Commission initiative to Council adoption. Although the new voting rules and the cooperation procedure facilitates quicker decision making by all of the institutions involved, they did not, that means, guarantee the adoption of a legislative act at the end of the progress, since much continued to be dependent on the political will of the member states. Then try to understand it here. The so far of the question is concerned, that means the Single European Act also gave a new impetus and legal basis to European political cooperation, which had been pursued since the early 1970s. However, this was not done by incorporation in the treaties. That means you can understand one thing is here, that means Single European Act also incorporated a number of amendments to the original treaties by including new policy areas like economic and social cohesion, environment, research, and your technologically cooperation. Then try to understand is here, that means the Single European Act also gave a new impetus and legal basis to the European political cooperation, which had been pursued since the early 1970s. However, this was not done by incorporation in the treaties. That means the Single European Act confirmed that, which is the already existing goals of the EPC and place decision making in the EPC on an intergovernmental basis. That means by consensus. One of the most important results of the Single European Act was the establishment of a permanent secretariat for EPC in Brussels. So this act increased the role and influence of the European Parliament in the architecture of community institutions by the introduction of a new assent procedure, whereby the European Parliament's assents by an absolute majority of the members of parliaments became necessary for the accession of new member states to the community and for association agreements between the community and third countries. The Act gave legal recognition to meeting between the heads of the governments of member states in the framework of European Council, which had been taking place since 1975. Then we have to understand that the capacity of the European Court of Justice, that is in the Single European Act, which was established in the new court of first instance. The incompetence of the Single European Act for the achievement of single markets lay in the fact that it provided the necessary virtuous and legal framework to achieve a truly unified market by 1992. So, the institutions reforms of Chopin's essay were to prove essential only for the establishment of single markets, but also in a moving beyond it to economic and monetary union. The enactment of the Single European Act lead to a period of considerable enthusiasm. That means so far as the enthusiasm and hope in Europe. It gave Western way of emission and a purpose to create the synergy required to compete effectively against both Japan and the United States of America. Then we have to understand the main features of the single market. So far as the free movement of person is essentially implied ensuring the freedom of the individual. So the companies to establish their business in the territory of other member states, just like ensuring the freedom of the individual. So you can find that legislation and court ruling facilitates this by ensuring mutual recognition of many educational, professional, and trade qualifications, and by providing key facilitators, notably in the form of establishment of various large entitlements, irrespective of nationality and place of domicile, to education and job training, healthcare, and social welfare payments. Then try to understand one thing is here. There means so far as the single market system is concerned, the approximation of such laws, that is regulation or administrative provisions of the member states are as directly affects the establishment of the or functioning of the common markets which can find in Article 94 of the TC. So the ultimate analysis, that is the approximation, is about creating conditions that allows and encourage and increase the uniform treatment of persons, that is goods, services, and capital throughout the European Union. And the most effect of the single market is, it was expected that economic gains would result from cheaper goods and services supplied from other member states, which improved efficiency as a result of more intense competition, a removal of monopolies in national markets, which is cheaper unit cost, that means costs, cheaper unit costs of goods, as it will now be possible to have economics of a scale, and the stimulus given to greater innovation and the development of new products and processes. All of this was likely to benefit the consumer in terms of lower prices and lead to greater economic welfare. There were likely to be saving of a cost and time, since it will involve the elimination of delays and bureaucracy at the borders. Some, however, feared that more intense competition could lead to the emergence of unfair competition from monopolized companies crossing the border, which will have to be regulated by the European Commission. So the completion of the internal markets was likely to deprive the member states of great many economic policy instruments and significantly heighten the exposure of hitherto sheltered economic activities to continental competition. So even though the European Union has achieved a deep level of economic integration, it will appear that borders in Europe still act as formidable constraints upon commerce between member states. This is so even in sectors where the European Union has sought to remove regularity, that means the regulatory barriers to trade, and sectors where different national regulations are not throughout to be important constraints to trade. Then try to understand one thing, so far as the obstacles is concerned. That means you can understand one thing, that there are intangible but extremely important obstacles arising from different historical experiences, cultures, traditions, and languages, which are only very slowly being overcome. Secondly, there continues to be resistance on the part of member states who are conscious of their national interests while developing and applying specific aspects of the single market. Thirdly, it is generally recognized that the non-participation of certain member states in the single monetary and exchange rates policies of Eurolands, the only partial developments of common regional and social, environmental, transports, and consumer policies, and the diversity of cohorts direct taxation system are all factors which have never formally become the part of the single market projects, but nevertheless act as obstacles to complete market integration. Then the most important thing is here, that means that is the Service Directive. So in this sense, the European Commission has launched a major initiative known as the Service Directive or the Blustein Directive after the former Internet Markets Commissioner, that means your Fritz Blustein, to improve the practical working of the internal market by ensuring the service providers collaborate as easily throughout the European Union. That means as they can in any single member states. So you can understand one thing, that service directives arrests concerns in countries with high standards of social protection. The countries fear that cheaper foreign companies will price out domestic companies. So in here, the most important thing is here, the European Commission estimates that increased service sector products quality brought about the enhanced competition that could significantly increase intra-European Union exports as well as enhance long-run growth. So the most important thing is here, the establishment of a single market has a number of tangible benefits with the removal of barriers. It is now possible for the people, goods, services, and money to move around Europe as a freely as within one country. So the opening of national European Union markets has brought down the price of national telephone calls to a fraction what they were 10 years ago. So we have studied the establishment of and effects of establishment of the single markets. That means the core of the today's European Union. To make it happen, the European institutions and the member of countries strove doggedly for 7 years from 1985 to draft and adopt the hundreds of directives needed to sweep away the technical, regulatory, legal, bureaucratic, cultural, and protectionist barriers that stifles free trades and free movements within the union. My dear students, please write down some important questions so far as this topic is concerned. Please write down that critically examine the main provisions of the Single European Act. Critically examines the main provisions of the Single European Act. And the second question is, please write down that discuss the motivating factors. Discuss the motivating factors for the establishment of a single market and discuss the nature and importance of the service directives. These are the important questions. My dear students, please write down and remember. Okay. So far as this question is concerned, try to understand one thing is here. That means this is a very important thing for our understanding. I think if my dear students, if you do have any questions, you can ask questions. You are all allowed to put forth your questions so far as your doubt is concerned. I may try to solve your problems. So far as our next class is concerned, I may take your class, that is tomorrow, that is 2nd April 2025. Time is 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Please write down 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. 2nd April 2025, our next class. So if you have any doubt, you should prepare questions and ask in our next class, or even in today's class. You are allowed, and be regular in your class. Be attentive in your class and tell your students and fellow participants to attend the class regularly, because our honorable and esteemed organization, Indira Gandhi National Open University, has taken a very nice step in order to develop a sound teaching learning process. So please cooperate with us and try to develop the standard of our education. Okay, thank you all for attending this class and your patient hearing. Thank you all. Or if you have any question, please raise.